Is this a new gen anime? I'm asking this because Jujutsu Kaisen started all the way back in 2018, so that's 6 years ago, and JJK is basically the face of Jump right now besides One Piece. So personally, it feels weird to call a 6-year-old manga that's at the top of Jump a new gen series. But based on how it technically works, JJK would technically be a new gen since One Piece is still considered the current gen. Now, I did another video a while ago where I basically said that the whole new gen thing is just a way of gatekeeping. But back then I did explain how it kinda makes sense. So now I'd like to explain why I think it's stupid. So first let's start with the current gen. There's a bunch of manga magazines, but let's stick with Jump. Okay, so if I gave you the latest issue of Jump and asked you to point to the current generation, you'd probably either just say they're all current gen, or you'd say that One Piece is the current generation. And here's where the One Piece thing makes sense. One Piece is the last of the older manga, so when we say One Piece is current gen, what we're saying is that generation of manga is still going on. So that's how that makes sense. So now let me explain why that's stupid. So One Piece came out in the late 90s. The next oldest manga came out in 2014. So by definition, One Piece would be the current gen, and My Hero and everything after would be new gen. Rationally speaking, that makes sense. But realistically, here's what you're doing. Realistically, what you are doing is taking the magazine and saying, here's One Piece that's like 25 years old. That's the current generation. Literally every other manga in this magazine is new. Which is dumb, because why do you think it makes sense to call a manga that's almost 10 years old a new manga? And I get it, it's not new, it's just new gen. That's fine and everything. But you gotta admit, it sounds kinda dumb to be like, Deku is my favorite new gen protagonist from 9 years ago. Asta is my favorite new protagonist. Again, I get it. New and new gen are not the same thing. But it just sounds lazy to be calling manga that are bordering on 10 years old new manga. So I think we need to redefine what we consider new gen. And to do that, we need to reconsider what we consider the current gen. But before I get into that, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. Okay, so let's take another look at Jump. We have One Piece as the oldest. The next oldest after that would be My Hero and Black Clover. After that, we have Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, Jujutsu Kaisen is an interesting one because while it is newer than My Hero, it's got well over 200 chapters and already has 2 anime seasons and a movie. So I think that's kind of bordering on new-ish and kind of current. By that logic, I would say anything that came out around the same time as My Hero and Black Clover would be the current gen. I don't know what a perfect cutoff would be for what makes something current gen versus new gen, but I would argue that once you're like JJK and you're over 200 chapters, it's safe to say you're not that new anymore. And just in my personal experience, here's why I'm pretty confident in calling My Hero the current gen. If you go into a bookstore or the comic book store, you will see little kids getting the classics like One Piece or Naruto. But you know what else they're getting into? My Hero Academia. You can see younger kids watching the new seasons and wearing Todoroki t-shirts. So if you have 10 to 14-year-olds talking about how My Hero is their favorite anime, then it kinda just goes to show that it's the current generation. As much as older anime elites like to think the world revolves around them, the reality is that these younger kids that are wearing Black Clover hoodies and playing as Deku in Fortnite are the current generation. So it only makes sense that we get with the times and start rethinking how we talk about these shows. If a show is 8+ years old and is mainstream enough to be on lunchboxes and Fortnite, I think we can stop calling it new gen. On the other hand, if a series is only about 100 chapters and still doesn't have an anime yet, that feels like a much better fit for new gen. And in case you haven't guessed by now, one of the first examples I thought of is Akane Banashi. Akane Banashi started in February of 2022, so it is just barely over 2 years old. Now, a 2-year-old I have no problem calling new gen. It's old enough to not be brand new, but it's early enough that it's still pretty young. Like I said, it's barely over 100 chapters. It only has about 10 volumes, and as of recording, it still doesn't have an anime. Plus, for those of you who are cultured enough to be reading the manga, it's still early enough in the story that the final arc doesn't feel like it's coming anytime soon. So something like that I would have no problem calling new gen. Now, as far as where we make the cutoff, I think Undead Unluck is actually the perfect solution. Undead Unluck just hit chapter 200, and funny enough, it already has an anime and it's in its final arc. Plus, it debuted in 2020. That would mean it's 4 years old and just a little younger than Jujutsu Kaisen. Here I think something like Undead Unluck is the perfect cutoff. If you say it's the last of the current gen, that's fine too. But if we say, okay, Undead Unluck is where the new gen starts, then that does a lot of justice. So for example, that would mean Dawn to Dawn would be new gen. Started in 2021, less than 200 chapters, and we're not getting the anime until October. Sakamoto Days would be new gen. Witch Watch, one of my personal favorites, would also be new gen. Gachi Akuta would also be new gen. No matter how you look at it, I think if we're going to do this whole new gen thing, this is what makes the most sense. Anything around My Hero is current gen, Undead Unluck and anything after is new gen, and One Piece and anything that came out before like 2010 or 2005 we can stop calling current gen. But on that note, I would also like to put out there that I really don't like talking about anime this way, for a couple of reasons. First off, like I said in my other video, I think all this does is help people gatekeep. Like, people put shows into these boxes and then they just assume that the older stuff is better when there's a lot of new manga that make older manga look like doggy doo-doo. Now, for the other thing, I gotta give credit to my guy Nox. He actually inspired this whole video. Again, I've already talked about this before, but when he listed all these manga, I was like, yeah, this current gen thing needs to die. But the other reason I don't like doing this is because of replies like this. Nox put all these great new manga, and this dummy had the gall to ask, where are Asta, Deku, and Luffy? Like, shut up, bro. My guy's trying to talk about these cool manga that came out in the last 2 or 3 years, and you're still stuck on the same manga. It just goes to show that people who constantly use the new gen or current gen thing are either A, brainless, B, attention-seeking bots, or C, all of the above. In any event, if we're going to keep doing this, all I ask is that we make some adjustments. If your manga is older than 4 years old, there's a safe chance we can stop calling it new gen. On that note, read some more manga, look at different magazines, and please touch some grass. But now I'd like to hear what you think. Would you make any changes? What do you consider new gen? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like another discussion like this one, then check out my previous video on My Hero Academia. In that video, I discuss the current state of the My Hero series. You can find that video in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.